Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back again to another exciting episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you like the content, do us a favor. Go on wherever you listen to us and give us a review. Share it with your friends. Share it with your social media. If it brings value to you, if you could help us out by spreading the word, that would really help us out and make it easier for us to do the things that we do. I am your host, Todd Barham, joined, as always, by the lead consultant of Advancement, the great Timothy Dominic Ware.
Now you've learned my middle name. You're going to use it every time.
Probably.
Ronnie? What are you doing, Ronnie?
Ronnie Todd, yes.
Ronnie Todd?
Ronnie Todd.
Good grief, you knucklehead. It's good to be with everybody today. Beautiful day outside. And when we're recording today, it's dadgum feels like winter in April.
Yeah. I had a coat on when I came in this morning. It was great.
I had my coat on when I came in this morning also. Well, I'm excited about this series of podcasts. We're starting today. We're going to be recording a 3-part series on really the idea of what are the things that this COVID crisis is going to leave lingering in the harvest field after it's gone away. And we've got a great panel with us, Todd. Yeah, you know, we often have people who have master's degrees and doctors on, but I feel a little intimidated because there's 3 doctors with us today.
Yeah, I felt like I needed to study up before today. I didn't, but I felt like I needed to.
Well, what would you have studied anyway?
I don't know. Maybe gone to the store and got more toilet paper. I think that would have prepared me for COVID-19. So.
Well, you know, I always tell my son and every meeting we have, we always tell people that chivalry's not dead. It's just comatose. So we're going to start with introducing the ladies today. We've got with us Dr. Nicole McAninch. She is a clinical associate professor and division leader of child and family studies in family and consumer sciences department at Baylor University. Gosh, that's a long thing.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
The house that RG3 built. Yeah.
No, that's the stadium that's on the corner.
Oh,
that's not the
sorry.
University. The university's been there longer than that. And
okay.
I have to tell you, we lovingly call her in my circles Dr. Mac or Nicole. Little inside information. Nicole also sits on the advancement board. So it's really fun to have you here. She'll report on me next week at our board meeting.
So she could fire me. She could fire me off the podcast, couldn't she?
I didn't know I had the power. All right.
No, I didn't. Okay. I'll be on my best behavior.
She also has, she and her husband, Chad, they pastor Connect Church there in Waco also. And they have 3 children, preschool and elementary. It's good to have you, Nicole.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Tim.
Absolutely. And then we have Stacie Sylvas. I always still want to call her Stacie Dowler because that's who she was when we first met, but she's been married since then. She's a licensed professional counselor and the founder and executive director of Thrive Counseling Services, a nonprofit organization providing low-cost, faith-based mental health services to the Dallas community. She is a crisis counselor and you know, my wife really loves Stacie. When I started talking about this, she said, you need to call Stacie. You need to call Stacie. So I called Stacie. And Stacie's been married for 8 years, and they've got 3 children. I guess, is that junior high age?
Mm-hmm. Got 1 in junior high.
1 in junior high and 2 preschoolers.
Yes, sir.
Woo! So good to have you,
Right.
Stacie.
Thank you.
All right. So how's homeschooling going?
Oh, it's going. It's going.
She's about as convinced as my wife is.
Every parent we ask that, they always go,
yeah. I love my kids so much. It's so much fun.
This is the extended summer, except for you can't go to the park. So it's real stir crazy.
Or do anything.
Yeah, yes, that's right. All right, also with us from the Woodlands, we have Dr. Chris Hernandez. You know what's funny, Todd? We always hear people when we have them on here, they say, I'm not that kind of doctor. he's that kind of doctor.
He is that kind of doctor. Yeah.
He's a board certified emergency physician in the Woodlands. He graduated from the University of North Carolina, and he is the stroke director of the emergency medical department there at the CHI St. Luke's Hospital. Is that right? CHI?
You got it, brother.
All right.
Chai, but it's CHI.
Oh, yeah, because I want to say chai when I look at it. Anyway, CHI Hospital there in the Woodlands, and he's also his wife and my wife. They're sisters. So Chris and I have known each other for a long time. We won't tell everybody how long.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and Chris has two kids, a senior in high school and a sophomore. What were you going to say, Todd?
I was going to say, Chris, I'm praying for you every day, buddy. Praying for you every day.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, to deal with Tim, you know.
Well, anyway, and then finally we have with us Dr. Blinn Blackwell. Ben is the director of HBU, Houston Baptist University's Theological Seminary, where he teaches New Testament. But we're excited today because he began his career not as a Bible professor, but he began as an actuarial consultant with Willis Towers Watson, providing services for Fortune 500. So we're really excited because we got somebody that understands the Bible and understands all the church stuff, but he also understands finance in a good way. He's a degree in accounting, and so we're excited about having him with us. He's been married for 22 years. He has 2 children, and his are probably he's probably got the next to the oldest kids, because both of mine, I've got a college graduate and a college student, and you've got one in college, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're from Arkansas, so we had kids as soon as we got married. So that's one in college and one in high school. So
there you go. I was reading up on your bio, and there were 2 things that I noticed that really made me smile. Number one, because of his finance background. If you go into his theology class, he's likely to talk to you about finances and retirement and budgeting. So. And but my favorite was what you sent me in your email. You said you don't ask anybody but your students to call you doctor except for your wife.
Yeah, that's right. He called me Dr. Blackwell, and I was like, nobody but my wife is supposed to call me Dr. Blackwell. So, but she picked up on that about 10 years ago too. So maybe right after I graduated. But
well, my wife said, yeah, I'm sure she really likes him saying that. Well, so, hey, guys, thank you all so much for being with us today. This is really we feel like an important topic. We've spent the last 6 weeks, like everybody else, we've been talking on the podcast about what the church can do during this crisis. But the more I've been praying over these days, the more I feel like this is a moment where we have to begin to prepare for what's to come. You know, when we look in history, if you go back in America, Spanish flu, beginning of World War I, the crash of the stock market, Pearl Harbor, the death of JFK, 9/11. After all these major events, there's the harvest they come to the church for a season, and up until all of those except 9/11, that we were in a church-going society, but 9/11 we were not in a church-going society. And we had this inrush, and the church actually did not capture many people for Jesus, because whether we were angry or whatever after 9/11, but we did not capture them. And I feel like what the Lord has been speaking to us is that we have an extended time to prepare for that harvest that's going to come. And so as we begin to enter into this conversation today, I think there's 2 things that we would love to talk about over these next 3 episodes. One is what's the short-term things that you guys from your professional perspectives expect that the people, how they will be affected. Because, you know, the truth is in every one of these instances that there's about 6 weeks where the church is just overloaded with people. So we have a prime opportunity in those first few weeks afterwards. But then there's the long term. After 9/11, travel has never been the same again. And we wonder what are some of the longer term things that we expect. So I'm just excited about this conversation. Let me begin by asking the question. I kind of want to let's direct it to the healthcare professionals to kind of set up some of this conversation. And let me start with you, Stacie. This is an extended time of fear in our society, and as well as isolation. Help us begin to set up the conversation by giving us a little insight in a crisis moment, what that's going to do to the mindset of people that don't have faith in Jesus and the hope of Jesus, that extended fear and that extended isolation will do in them, to kind of kick us off.
Sure, Tim. Let me just start with a quick fact. So anxiety disorders are the most common mental health problem in the United States of America, so affecting approximately 40 million Americans every year. So that's already a huge chunk of the population that struggles with anxiety. And I think when we think of anxiety disorders, there's lots of different reasons why people can be struggling with those, but highly correlated to just a sense of fear, of uncertainty, and not knowing how to cope with that very well. And right now, I anticipate that there's going to be an increase in how people are feeling that anxiety, and an increase in the number of people experiencing anxiety to a level that becomes disruptive and debilitating in their lives. So we're already looking at a population that's got a high level of anxiety, and everything that's gone on in the last few weeks here is just serving to increase those anxiety levels. Mm-hmm. So the ways that people are experiencing that fear is definitely around feeling insecure in relationships. Everyone who was maybe struggling with a relationship in their life prior to this is struggling more. It served to kind of point up the places where there was already pain or difficulty in people's relationships. And so I think you're going to see more people reaching out to look for solutions to say, okay, I've realized that there's this insecurity, this uncertainty in the relationships that I have in my life, and I want to find some way to address that, or at least I'm noticing that and feeling that in a way that I hadn't prior to this.
So what you just said is you expect that there will be a broader, a little more intense focus on relationships.
Absolutely.
Okay. Obviously, that's why we have experts, because I never thought about that. Now, because one of the things that I was talking to someone, Chris, and they said that even all this fear is, you guys as an ER doctor, people aren't coming because fear is keeping them away. Their fear of catching it if I go to the ER because I need to go to the doctor, but I'm not going to go. That there's this flip going on in y'all too.
Yeah, I think you're seeing two kinds of fear that are on there. So first, let me just piggyback off of what Stacie was just talking about, anxiety. Even before COVID came out, my colleagues and I are incredibly surprised at the amount of anxiety and fear that is in the community. When I first started medicine, maybe 20 years ago or so, things were pretty much straightforward. You'd see heart issues, you'd see gallbladder issues, you'd see stroke, whatever. Occasionally, every now and again, you'd start seeing issues with mental health, but really it wasn't to the forefront of what we were seeing. Fast forward to now where we are, and even before COVID, it's incredible the number of patients that show up in the ER for stress and anxiety related issues. We jokingly call it third world problems. So we'll say, hey, what do you got in room 4? And we'll say, oh, well, it's a third world problem, meaning it's issues with stress, anxiety, relationships, not so much a medical or a physical problem. And so more and more in our ERs, especially in our suburban ERs, which is kind of one of the ones that I'm at, we're starting to see a lot of issues with stress. Now compound that with COVID that's come out, and with all of the issues that we're seeing in the news, just constantly pumping out fear and numbers and stuff. So yes, I can completely understand what Stacie's talking about, how we may particularly see a little bit of an increase in fear in the general population. I think we as Christians have an obligation to try to calm that fear. The Bible says in 2 Timothy that God's not given us the spirit of fear. So one of the things we try to do, not only as healthcare workers, but also as Christians, is to immediately address the fear part of the problem and say, okay, well, maybe we have a physical part of this problem, but clearly we have a fear component to this as well. And how can we address that fear, and how can we stop that just a little bit? Now, to go on a little bit about how you were talking, as in some of the people are just afraid to come to the hospital in general, you're right. I think that's kind of a second kind of a fear. Anecdotally, when a person walks into the hospital and they see everybody with masks and bunny outfits on, they kind of think twice about what
bunny outfits.
Yeah, so
it is Easter.
I was going to say, it's Easter, so everybody's just like the Easter bunny at the hospital.
Personal protective equipment, or commonly known as the bunny outfit. So you put on the whole thing, right? Not that
like the Christmas Story.
That's right. Yeah.
But yes, we have people checking in, signing in, and they see our environmental services people cleaning the rooms with their whole masks and so forth on, and they think twice. They're like, on second thought, my hemorrhoids aren't that bad. I think I'll just wait.
I can wait on the hemorrhoids.
Well, it says, this fear piece is compounded by the economic challenges that we're seeing. It's not just the market, it's job loss, but I think we probably also are seeing that our society we've become such a free spending society that people don't have reserves. And so there's some economic things that have just piled on to this.
Yeah, there's statistic escapes me now, but something, like 20% of the population that couldn't handle a $400, I think is the statement, a bill that came in unexpectedly. And of course, there's many here that, if you don't have any income, in the service economy particularly, then those, you've lost your source of income there. And of course, the wisdom of the unemployment system is to be a brake on that when people have these economic troubles. And so I know I was talking to one of my students last night that here in Texas, she's put in her paperwork and just hoping that it'll be processed, but hadn't heard anything back in about a week. And so it was just that sense of how quickly all those mechanisms will come into play.
Yeah, and another thing that's kind of been on my mind through all this whole COVID thing, we've had strains on finances, we've had strains on fear, but I think one of the biggest strains we're going to see, from what I've read, is in the family. We talked about relationships coming out and are having our kids home more is going to exacerbate problems that were happening before this. Dr. Nicole, what would you say? What kind of effects long term is this going to have on family structures and units?
So did he just call you Dr. Nicole out of fear that you might say something bad about him in a board meeting?
I was trying to be nice. Okay, all right. She worked for that.
Thank you so much. I'll accept it. I'll accept the.
Excuse me, Dr. Mac. Okay, is that what Tim?
The stirring of the pot by Tim.
Fire Tim, okay? Just do that.
Okay, I'm all over that.
All right.
Yeah, no, I think, one of the things prior to COVID-19 was, we were having so many conversations as a field about how busy and how stretched families were. Prior to that, their worlds were fairly large because they were engaging in so many activities, particularly outside of the home, and being concerned about what the effects of family life would be because of that. And one of the things you just said, Todd, that can be very true is families, their worlds have shrunken down. Their world is their home and, the people in their family, which is compounded by the idea also that, for many of our families, those that could also be multiple homes though. So this could have really significant impacts for families who do have shared custody and those kinds of things. I was actually just reading about a doctor who had her custody is in question right now because of her exposure to COVID-19 patients. And so I just think that all this said in, all the things that kept us busy, and maybe even as Stacie was mentioning, things that we were ignoring that were issues in our family life, and we could ignore because we had buffers, if you will. We have all these things that we can add to life that will allow us to ignore those things. We don't have those anymore, which means there's no way to ignore the problems that currently exist. I also think, though, families, and particularly from, I just know from a background in child and family ministry is, I've started hearing lately, which to a degree can be a good thing, right? Parents are the first educators or the primary, spiritual, encouragers of their children. All those things are true. But I think right now, parents are definitely in this, they are that. And there are few other people that they can actually reach out to in terms of a practical resource or a face-to-face resource right now to alleviate some of those stressors. So most parents are still having to work full-time in very different capacities, or now they're not working at all, which has its own stressors. And now they are the primary educator and spiritual caregiver and all those other kinds of things in their children's lives. And I just think about the role strain that parents are experiencing right now because of that.
It's an interesting phrase, role strain.
And one of the things I'm concerned about moving forward, and I mean, I guess anybody can answer this one, is what kind of what are the memories that my kids are going to have of all this at the end of it all. And I know a lot of that depends on how we shepherd them through this time, but my wonder is just what kind of world my kids are going to go back to when all this comes back.
I think I would even ask the question, how do we think this crisis is going to shape this generation? This is probably, when you look back, there are moments in history, those who were raised in the Depression, who were children in the Depression, it changed them. The children, there are different moments in this extended time. What do you guys, and let's throw it out to everybody, what is the long-term impact, do you think, on our school-age students, the next generation, that we can start looking at and we should expect, especially for those that don't know Jesus, that are caught in the fear and don't have the faith covering? Go.
Yeah, I was just going to mention one of the books that we have looked at more recently in the work that I do is called iGen. And it's talking about how we used to have, you've all heard the phrase FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. But it really said that, it was kind of predicated on a study that was looking at this generation moving into college right now. And that really they are more led by FOGO, the fear of going out, because they've been raised in a post 9/11 society with incidences of school shootings and those kinds of things. And where, for them, yes, there still is that element of the fear of missing out, but it's actually more of a fear of going out, that they're not getting driver's licenses. They're putting that off for years, and just kind of this fear of taking on adult responsibilities. And I wonder how much this experience is going to exacerbate that then for the generation that's coming just right after them. Is, we were already seeing that being taken on, this fear of taking on adult responsibilities and kind of pushing those off later and later on. And so just wondering how the hypersensitivity to hygiene and to health issues and the fear of what somebody else is carrying and those kinds of things, how much that might just kind of be impacted by some of the concerns that we already see in our late teens to college students right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ben, as another professor, what that idea of FOMO to FOGO getting intenser, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was asking my wife about this. She's an elementary teacher as well. And we've noticed that more kids are out playing in the streets in our neighborhood than we've seen in the 10 years we've lived here in Houston. And so there's a sense of, where's the going out? Is it, you'd go somewhere else, drive 10, 20, 30 minutes, even go to church, right? And you miss out on the things that are right immediate there with you. And so there is some sense of like the going outness is now, the parents, back when I was a kid, they locked the door and told you to stay outside.
Yeah, exactly.
And then now lock the door and won't let them go outside. And so there's a sense to where maybe we're recovering some of that, at least immediate, connection with our neighbors, just as in that sense of the parents, we're afraid of them getting sick, but we're more afraid of going crazy by locking, by staying in the house even more, and so, so it's that tension, I think, in the midst of all that. There is, for the older kids, that's definitely that sense of where have we led them to. I was talking to one of the first generation pastors at Houston's First about this, and just the sense, the importance of parenting for discipleship, because we tend to think, you kind of have this neutral time or influence on your kids, but it's really that junior high pastor, or, those high school teachers or when kids are making those decisions on their own. But he was saying it's so much more important for elementary and age families that the parents are guided into what does it look like to disciple your kids in that, because all those patterns are really laid down there and then playing out when they're in those older grades.
Yeah. I guess as I'm listening to y'all, the thought that comes to mind is that we've seen this push towards a global, all this talk about a global community, but the question that's going on in my head is the society at large, is this maybe a short term? This probably isn't a long term, but is this going to be a short term pulling back to the smaller community, neighborhood, the things that would have been 40, 50 years ago, a pulling back that would then release slowly?
I'd say just a quick tension in society is this move towards like the online, social media, connected elsewhere. But then we also have this return back to like a broader trend towards like vinyl records and board games and things like this. And so there is this kind of tension towards two directions society is pulling in, is the more connected externally as well as the more connected internally or embodied. And I think this will play out in that. Like Amazon is the big driver of everybody's life right now, is this virtual company that exists, but then also you have this time at home as well. And so I don't think either of those, it's going to be an either or. It's just going to be a different way that both of those play out.
Stacie, what do you see, because in that sociologically?
I definitely see the local being more important right now, and I think for the short term in a lot of ways. And specifically, a lot of the people that I work with are maybe oftentimes a little lower on the socioeconomic class, just because of the way we offer discounted services. And so I think I especially see for that segment of the population which has increased right now, the number of people struggling, financially struggling to make their bills and things like that, is that those people are very much looking towards their neighbors, their friends, the church or the community center or the food bank that's just down the street. They very much pulled in close. And I found that people are connecting, reaching out in ways that they wouldn't have done locally, just to the people who are right there in their neighborhood. And I think that will continue. I think there will be some people who are more apt to and want to just connect locally with people that are near them, with resources that are near them, with people that they feel like are invested in their particular community.
One of the things that we talk about a whole lot is helping people when we're working with churches, is tell them, they talk about all the people they want to reach, they want to do all these programs, and we say, but you're willing to let your neighbor go to hell because you won't talk to your neighbor. And so what I hear you guys saying is this may be that opportunity for people to invest the gospel in their local neighbors in a way that hasn't been for a long time. So that's what it sounds like y'all are kind of saying. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, Tim.
Todd, you had a question?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been wondering about, and maybe y'all can help me, is, as a pastor, my primary focus is what is this world going to look like when we come back, and how can the church effectively reach these people who are going to come back? Obviously people are going to come back and they're going to be a little hesitant about being in larger groups. They're going to be a little hesitant about being around people. What are some things that we can do to reach out to the non-church people, the people that haven't been coming to our church before all this started? What are ways that we're going to be able to reach out to them, make them feel comfortable, make them feel secure, and meet their needs meet the needs that they have and that they've experienced during this time? Anybody can take this.
Yeah, that's a good question. Todd, I'll jump in there on some of this.
Okay.
I think we have a window, if you ask me, of opportunity. And Tim had mentioned all of these disasters that we had in our most recent past. I guess the last one being 9/11 that you could say was our greatest catastrophes. You could also add the school shootings and so forth that we have in there. And so I think we have a window of time, does the church, when America gets into what I would call disaster mode. People hunker down, people try to stay safe, people try to buy a bunch of toilet paper, feel like they're in control of it. One thing, right?
Yeah.
But eventually that disaster mode kind of wears down just a little bit, and then people start doing things to some degree back to normal again. Here in the Gulf Coast, we have hurricanes. And so what happens when a hurricane blows through, we get into disaster mode. People hunker down, people stay in their homes, and for a short season, they are doing what we've now been doing for the last month or so. But inevitably, after the hurricane passes, people get anxious to do things back to normal again. And I think, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, that people are going to be anxious to try to get back to some degree of normalcy. Now, we may move that standard deviation just a little bit, in that we will see a little more hygiene-related precautions. If I had to guess, I think it'll be a little more normal to see people walking around with masks on or with gloves on. I think we had already started to see that incrementally, little by little. We'd started to see people becoming a little more hygiene conscious. You see more hand sanitizers in different places. The guy at Subway now has gloves that he wears when he's doing your sandwich and then throws it away, right? So I think little by little we started getting there. So if I had to guess, I think that we're going to be a little bit more hygiene conscious. But I think we have a window of opportunity where right now people are looking for help. They are looking for answers. They are looking for faith again, where we can kind of come back and minister to them. I think that is a window, though, that may shut, and then again, people are going to go back to their lives again as well.
So Todd, what I heard him just say is, you need to make sure our nurseries need to be cleaner. Yeah. Our children's areas need to be cleaner. People, people, if there's a little more hygiene consciousness, when they come to your facility, their radar is going to be up. And if that fear of germs is accentuated rather than eliminated by what they see, by the cleanliness of your facility, you may lose an opportunity.
Right.
Is that, kind of what I heard?
Yeah, and if I could just jump in a little bit more there, I think we can do both. I don't think we have to do either or. Right?
I agree.
Sometimes we as the church are painted as the rebel or the outlier that does things differently. But I frequently talk to some of the pastors here in this area, and when they're asking me as a doctor, well, what should we do? I said, you can do both. You can be observant to, the things that are declared as a county or whatever, and you can also still serve the Lord. So let's try to see what we can do to do both.
Well, Nicole, you've got a type 1 diabetic child, so she's high risk. In elementary school, that's a high risk in all this. And I mean, from a parent's perspective, obviously you're a person of faith, but for the parent who's not a person of faith, who has those high risk children, there's just some things that I think that it's very easy for pastors to just and church leaders to look past and not see and not think about. So
yeah, I would say, you know, as a person of faith, but then thinking about for those who may be seeking or trying to figure out if faith is the next step for them. I think the one thing that we can't do in response is we can't ask them to check their rational choice at the door. I think we have to be fairly explicit about these measures that we're taking to keep people safe. And I don't think we can ask people to exhibit a faith that they're only currently exploring to know if that's even something that they want to, walk past the door on. And so even for myself, I have conversations, with people of, whether we go to the grocery store or things like that, we just want to make wise choices because we realize our choices are impacting, somebody we love, and that's important. And so I think that the best thing that we can do for people who are coming in the doors of our churches after, we're able, once we're able to do those things, is that we're being, not to fearmonger, but just to be clear about, hey, these are the things that we're putting into place to keep everybody safe. And we're not asking you to check that at the door. We are committed to keeping people healthy and well and safe in this space. But I also think, one of the things that I was thinking in that is while I feel confident people, yes, are going to want to get back to normal. I mean, truly, right? We're all going stir crazy, in our spaces. But I wonder, I think it kind of goes back to both, and what Stacie was saying is we're connecting with people who feel trusted right now, right? Like our world is, the people that we know are trustworthy are the people we're connecting with. And I wonder if, as people start to connect out to the larger world, which could include churches, I just think so many of the online things we're doing, yes, we want to then create the physical face-to-face spaces, but I wonder how much for people who have not yet engaged in that, maybe we'll still lean on some of those online or distancing experiences as they try to figure out if that's something that they want to do. I just wonder. That's just something that I wonder. Like, I think it's good to create those sanitary spaces, and definitely with children, that's significantly important. I just wonder how still, like, not to drop the good things we've been doing in this season of making sure people are connecting beyond the church walls. I just wonder how many people, as they're exploring, may utilize those first before they actually come into face-to-face scenarios.
Well, we're really coming up on the end of our time for this episode, and as we come back next time, we'll continue this conversation. I'd love for you guys to start thinking about, because it's kind of been hinted around in this conversation. Let's kick into and try to think about what the new normal is going to look like, because it will never go all the way back. What's the new normal going to look like in healthcare and in families and in colleges and in anxieties and in finances and in all these things? Let's, for people that don't know Christ, our next time together, we'll kind of start talking really specifically about what we think new normal is going to look like. All right, Todd. So what was your takeaway here?
So my biggest takeaway was, and I forgot who said it, so forgive me for not giving you credit, but I think
you're forgetful like that.
Yeah, it happens. I should really write in here who said it, but one of the things that was said is that the generation before the one that is now was really slow to get driver's license and things like that, and this may exacerbate the generation that follows it being afraid of going out, I think is the way y'all phrased it. And that was very interesting to me because, I grew up, I can't wait to get my driver's license. I can't wait to get out of the house. I can't wait to do this. And, now we're going to have to understand that this new normal is families and kids are going to be real hesitant to do that. And so as a church, for me, really kind of my takeaway is I'm going to have to help the parents in empowering their kids to go out, empowering their kids and helping them have the faith to go out and do the things that they need to do, that they're probably going to be afraid to do, especially after all this COVID thing. And so that's where I was kind of encouraged, that as a pastor, giving them, helping balance the faith over fear, and helping train our kids that, it's okay to be independent, even though we don't want you to. It's okay to send you out.
My children didn't have a choice. They were getting their driver's license.
It's the way it's going to be for my kids.
All right. Well, we're so glad. Thank you guys again, Chris, Stacie, Nicole, Ben, for being with us. Look forward to the next one. And Todd, here we are, wrapping up another episode of the Advancement Podcast Quarantine Edition. Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.